As is the case with many of my stories, I find myself going down a deep, dark, spiraling rabbit hole of research. I start swirling around from one topic to the next to try to make sense of one item. This is a glimpse into my thinking, a trajectory that takes me through some very old maps, exploring flintlock pistols and their history. A lion will appear in our story, as do some wolves, all tied together by deeds and census reports from the past. But let me first take you where the story begins, which is actually where the story ends. We were at the Bethany house when Mike from Gr8 Finds started shouting about something he had just found. I was looking at a find that someone else just dug and didn't capture his excitement. This is what he had found. This is a story I was eager to dig into. What he found, we quickly determined, was the end to a gun, specifically a flintlock pistol. It is known as either a butt cap or a pommel. Everyone said this looks like a lion carved into the metal, which I believe to be brass. More on that later. Now, this butt plate, as you can see, has a rectangular hole on the end. You can kind of see the crudeness of that hole. When something so exciting is found on the spot, your mind swirls. It looks for answers. You try to figure out what the item is and how old. You pull out phones and do some on-the-spot research. Initially, it was thought to be late 16 or early 1700s. That thought came mostly from the hole, and how that would have received a square nail instead of a screw, which would have aged the gun sometime later. Now that I've dug into this a bit more, I do believe that rectangular hole wasn't there to receive a nail, but rather a second piece to the butt cap with a small tang. Here is an example of such a butt cap with the shank measuring about 1.5 inches. One other thing kept recurring in my research, and that is I don't believe the etching to be that of a lion, but rather a grotesque mask. I have seen over and over again examples of flintlock pistols with grotesque masks. Of the many examples of such pistols I have researched, some do have the look of a lion or other animal. Many are a blurred reality of human form with animal characteristics. These grotesque masks, similar to gargoyles, were believed to ward off bad spirits. I suppose such a meaning makes it appropriate to put a grotesque mask on a gun. These grotesque masks reached popularity in the Georgian era, which would more than likely age this found artifact to the mid-1700s, perhaps 1760s. But this is just my opinion. I am far from an expert. Without the full pistol, there is no maker mark or other identifying attributes that would make it easy to identify who made the gun, or even more basic, where it was made. I've searched many examples of flintlock pistols and none jumped out to me as one with a similar butt cap. It's probably safe to say it was made in Europe. So, I take a turn down the rabbit hole. Who could have owned this gun? Of course, such things are nearly impossible to tell, but I do have a map, and that map seems to line up a structure with the name M. Wolf. Now, on a map from 1872, there are two very close structures, one marked M. Wolf, where the item was found, and another labeled M. Wolf Res. I can only assume that stands for residence, but I'm not sure. Does that mean one place was a residence and the other a business? The name Wolf does not appear in the list of businesses. So who is or are these M. Wolves listed on the map? I start to search through online deeds from Cumberland County. Before starting down this path, I had no idea how deeds were organized. I figured out that there were grantor, or seller, and grantee, or buyer versions of the same data. If you know a name, you look that person up in both books to see how many times that person sold or bought land based on which book you are in. The books are only partially alphabetical. Keys at the top of the pages would direct you to first the last name, then the first. In this case, the names starting with WO span pages 169 to 209. Our M. Wolf would appear on page 191. Entries on this page are chronological. When I have found the M. Wolves in both the grantor and grantee indexes, I repeatedly find Moses and Mary in South Middleton Township. From these indexes, you can find the actual recorded deed by going to another book, which is written in full chronological order. You simply find the volume, book, and page. I'm interested in this one deed where Mary and Moses Wolf are both listed as grantors on the same deed. I open the book and find out that Mary and Moses sold land to Jacob Lehman, but also listed in the sale is Nancy, noted as Moses' wife. My best guess at this point is Mary has to be Moses' sister. Is this the reason two M. Wolves are on the map and so close to one another? Well, as with many old documents, they aren't complete online, and some of the deeds of interest are not available. I would have to go to the Cumberland County Courthouse to do further research. But I keep moving on and ultimately find 3 online censuses from the 1800s, all of which list Moses. And I see his wife listed with 4 children. I do not find Mary at all listed. Entries in the census are entered as houses are visited. And something interesting happens. In a census from 1870, I see John Baker, Moses Wolf, and George Bishop listed in that order. When I go to the map from 1872, I can see how a census taker would go from John Baker to Moses Wolf to George Bishop, skipping some houses on the way because of no one being home or perhaps refusal to answer questions. I find the exact same thing when looking at the census from 1850. Without question, Moses Wolf lived at one of the 2 residences and perhaps owned both, or perhaps Mary owned one. I'm not really sure why I dug so far into who lived on this property. I knew it probably wouldn't lead to more understanding of the artifact, but I was hopeful. I'm unable to find who were the parents of Moses. I do know from the census Moses was born in Pennsylvania. From the data on the census, he would have been born roughly in 1802. Now, if only I could track down who his parents were, there's a chance they would have come from another country. That would probably give me a bit more information about the gun. Assuming they did come from Europe, they would have most likely bought the gun in their home country and brought it to the United States with them. The time frame roughly fits that Moses' father may have been the original owner of the gun. These are the rabbit holes I go down, the twists and turns of research, wanting to find the historical truth of one item. And in the end, the story doesn't fully present itself. And so, I fill in the gaps. Moses' father is coming of age to go out and work on his own. He lives in Great Britain and is the son of a modestly wealthy family. Being one of many siblings, he can choose to stay and work the land with his family, knowing full well, with this many siblings, he wouldn't inherit much. He hears of people obtaining land in America, land so rich and plentiful. Being young and ambitious, he decides to make his way across the ocean. Before leaving, his father hands him enough money for his passage and a pistol. He tells him these 2 gifts are his inheritance, knowing he will probably never see his son again. The pistol has a beautiful golden pommel. It's the first thing one notices about this gun. Perhaps it was the reason this particular gun was purchased. Off the young man goes to America, where he quickly finds land by pushing east into central Pennsylvania. This was a time shortly after the Royal Proclamation of 1763, where colonists were pushing beyond the Appalachian Mountains. His timing was perfect and was able to squat on a considerable amount of land. He's hard-working and starts building a house from the trees he cuts down to make way for his farm. Being so industrious, he easily catches the eye of the young woman. Her family moved to the colonies earlier, and as such she was born in Pennsylvania. They marry and have several kids, including Moses and Mary. All throughout the father's journey, this gun was by his side. He knew he needed to protect himself from Native Americans, as well as brown bears and coyotes. It also was used to acquire food, rabbits and groundhogs. That beautiful pommel, how it was the first thing he noticed when he was handed this gun. But in use, it's just hidden by the hand. It's turned down and not even noticed. Moses would eventually learn to use this pistol. He would need to help protect the family and put food on the table. He was first taught to use it at age 12. By the time Moses turns 20, the percussion cap is invented and is much more reliable and safe. The Wolf family had done very well farming on this land and can easily afford the latest pistols and rifles. Moses' father passes away. He never spoke of why this gun was so important. He always hurt to see his parents and siblings and chose never to talk about them, or how the gun came into his possession with Moses. From time to time, Moses would pull the old gun out just for fun, just to see if it still worked. The gun was nearly 60 years old now, and not too reliable. It was never properly maintained after they had acquired better guns. The wooden handle, left to the elements, had seen some water and some insects and started to rot. The iron was rusting. The last time Moses tried to use it to scare away the groundhogs, he realized it would never work again, and he simply tossed it in the trash pile behind the house. Mike would come along and find it 150 years later.